Hello, and welcome to GDA Live. I am Gail Davis, and I am your host. I am so eager to introduce all of you to our guest today, Erica Dhawan. Erica is the world's leading authority on connectual intelligence. She speaks, trains, and consults with business leaders on innovative strategies that increase value for clients, deliver results, and ensure competitiveness. Her new book, Digital Body Language, was just released in May. And talk about timing. I feel like the content of this book is what everyone was looking for. Erica and her book have already hit #3 on the Wall Street Journal bestseller list, and they made it on the JP Morgan's annual summer reading list. Her book has received testimonials from many of the great thought leaders like Dan Pink, Adam Grant, who also put her book on his summer reading list, and the COO of Facebook, Sheryl Sandberg. Today, Erica is going to merge two of her keynote topics, digital body language and getting big things done, which is all about the power of connectual intelligence. The content is so rich that I've decided I'm going off camera and I'm turning it over to Erica so you all get the benefit of all of her great content. So Erica, welcome, thank you, and take it away.
Thank you so much, Gail. In the last year, we have seen more disruption, yet more innovation than in perhaps the last 10 years. All of you as leaders and team members have had to reimagine how you connect and collaborate. Digital tools that got little traction for years are now business requirements, not only for productivity and collaboration, but also for social connection, brainstorming, and even celebration. And I believe that the question we must ask ourselves at this moment in time is no longer simply, how will we adapt to our new normal? But more importantly, how will we create a better normal? How will we use the lessons of this last year to make sure we don't go back to the work the way it was and instead truly transform work? As Gail shared, my name is Erica Dhawan, and my life's work is really to help leaders and teams connect intelligently in our 21st century world. But when it comes to connecting intelligently today, we all know it's not as easy as it sounds. Let me share a true story between two colleagues, Sarah and John. One Wednesday afternoon, Sarah has an idea for her boss, John, so she shoots him an email saying, "Quick thought, what do you think of this idea for the deliverable?" What she really meant was, "I have a great idea. It's not fleshed out yet, but I'd love to get your thoughts." At about 8 p.m. that night, after a long day of video calls, John gets the note and he's confused. He thought the deliverable was done. He didn't understand why Sarah was sending the message now. He sends a note saying, "How would this fit in? Doesn't seem like you thought this through, ... What he really meant was, "I don't understand what you mean by this. You're closer to the work than I am. I need more context from you." Sarah's putting her 3 kids to bed. She's frazzled while she's reading this note on her phone. She spends 35 minutes late that night crafting a structured email with bold and underlined headings, changing the title from "Quick Thought" to "Deliverable Changes." John got the note and thought to himself, "This is pretty great." He didn't say that. He just shot off some more questions to Sarah. Now Sarah thinks John is being passive aggressive. She waits until the next morning and finally writes, "Can we chat about this before a team meeting tomorrow?" What she really felt was 5 exclamation points. This isn't a productive way of engaging. We need to switch how we are collaborating. John gets this note. He thinks everything's great and says, "Can you send your thoughts in writing?" What he really meant was, "I would just love to better understand this so we can loop in our other colleagues in that team meeting." Now, at this point, Sarah's about to have a heart attack. John thinks everything's great. What could have been a 15-minute phone or video call took 5 hours of time, stress, and fear over a 12-hour period. Now, I would like to ask all of you, if you've ever experienced a situation like this before, go into the chat right now and say yes. And tell me, who have you been? Have you been Sarah? Have you been John? Or have you been both? Just let us know, who are you in this story? We think we have communication down, but we all know it's harder than we think. I recently ran a study of thousands of office workers and found that on average, employees are wasting up to 4 hours per week on poor, unclear, or confusing digital communication. Because here's the reality, roughly 3/4 of face-to-face collaboration is our nonverbal body language. Pacing, pauses, gestures, tone, eye contact, handshakes. This is what allowed us to build trust and connection. But already prior to the pandemic, up to 70% of our communication was already virtual. We were on conference calls, we were emailing, we were communicating digitally with those on the same floor in the office. That has just shot up to 100%. And what it really requires all of us to think about is how we will reimagine collaboration in the new world we are living in. I will never forget pre-pandemic, I was on a conference call. 3 of us were remote and 3 people were in the office. It wasn't until the 26th minute of a 30-minute meeting that someone in the office said, "Does anyone on the phone have something to share?" We had been excluded the entire time. If you've ever experienced that before, say yes in the chat. The last year has actually taught us how we can be more geographically inclusive, less visually biased, more creative and innovative to avoid turn-taking using tools like the chat and virtual whiteboards. At the same time, it has been challenging. Research shows we're more likely when working behind a screen to misunderstand each other quickly, to speak more freely, sometimes more rudely, to argue more. Passive aggressiveness or assumptions that someone is passive aggressive can shoot up, especially in the story of Sarah and John. And sometimes we walk away faster from relationships when we don't hear back from someone, when we feel ghosted by a colleague. So today I really want to talk about how do we bypass these challenges? How do we build cultures of trust and connection no matter the distance? The answer is through a critical skill that I call connectional intelligence. Connectional intelligence is the capability to unlock new and unrealized value by fully harnessing the power of our networks and relationships. We all know what IQ is. 20 years ago, emotional intelligence came to stage. But we can't rely on body language and just reading a room to truly connect across any culture, any distance, any silo, any customer or client. We need to be able to build that nuance no matter the person, no matter the distance. So today I want to introduce you to some unimaginable examples of connectional intelligence that you can apply as a meeting planner, as a leader, as a team member. And then I'm going to give you 4 practical principles of how you can apply it in a digital and hybrid world. First, I want to share a few stories and examples of connectional intelligence. This first example is from a community called the Granny Cloud. Now, if you've ever heard of the Granny Cloud, go into the chat and say yes right now. The Granny Cloud is a community of thousands of grandmothers that come around together around the world online and video mentor and tutor children in poor villages across India. Now, this all began through an experiment where one professor put computer Wi-Fi enabled kiosks in slum villages across India to see what would happen if the students had access to the internet. And when he visited month after month, he saw they were learning, they were practicing coursework, and this whole idea of self-enabled learning through technology began to spread. A group of grandmothers read articles about this and they said, "This is so great. How can we help?" Now, when the professor got this question, what would have been the traditional response? Buy us more computers, donate money. But these grannies had a different idea around how they could connect intelligently. They said, what if we created a video Skype network? Today, thousands of grandmothers around the world are participating in mentoring children now around the world using this cross-generation learning model. The story doesn't stop there. In fact, research is now being done to show that the video interaction that these grandmothers are having is helping to increase their cognitive ability as they decline in age and are often idle and home alone, not only in these times, but in senior centers and retirement centers. So the first question I want all of you to think about is how are we truly leveraging networks outside of our own? How are we using the power of this transformation of our digital shift to really allow learning, networks, and best-in-class value from anyone, anywhere? The second story I want to share is from a toothpaste company, Colgate-Palmolive. A few years ago, a team of chemists had developed a new fluoride that they were mixing in their toothpaste, but there was a mechanical flow problem. The fluoride got stuck and none of the chemists could figure it out. It was taking months and months of time. Finally, one chemist said, why don't we ask a different network? They posted it in a scientific online community. Within 2 days, a physicist on the site solved the problem. He helped them realize it was a physics problem, not a chemistry problem. The Colgate team realized a few things. The first thing, They hadn't even asked the physicists at their own company because they had labeled it as a chemistry problem. The second thing, that physicist would have never been hired by Colgate. He didn't want to work for a large company. But in today's age, we can use connectional intelligence to not only break silos, to broaden our questions, to identify those that can contribute beyond job titles, but to also leverage networks far beyond our usual suspects to drive innovation moving forward. The last quick story I want to share is about a law firm. Now, the CFO of this law firm noticed something happening. He noticed that his youngest associates were billing less hours than ever before. When he dug into it, he discovered it wasn't because they were doing something wrong. It was actually because they were more productive in a digital world. They had created a peer-to-peer network between first-year law firm associates, almost like a Twitter type network, to help each other solve cases faster outside of clunky reply all emails and Zoom meetings. Questions like, where's this project? Who's done this before? Where can I find this citation? This was not only dropping the billing hours, but it forced the senior leaders to reimagine productivity through peer-to-peer collaboration. Now they've created peer-to-peer virtual networks across every level of the firm. One of the most powerful networks is a network of senior hires that have come in from competitors. That is a virtual network for competitive intelligence for the entire firm. So as we think about this example, how are we not only connecting upwards and downwards, but sideways, and mastering the power of breaking silos, no matter the distance? So in today's quick GDA Live, I wanted to give you a quick introduction of the importance of connectional intelligence, but also share some practical ways of how you can apply it in our digital and hybrid world. And I spent the last 10 years helping leaders and teams through keynotes and workshops build and implement these skills. I truly believe that what emotional intelligence was in the 90s, connectional intelligence is for our digital hybrid 21st century world. But how do we truly apply connectional intelligence in a hybrid world where we're not always face-to-face, where we have to lead hybrid meetings, where we need to be connecting with those in the room, but also those coming in on video screens? And what I've identified in my research is that there's a critical skill that we all need to master today. And this critical skill will not only allow us to be more effective in the office, it will allow us to connect with those across anywhere in our workplaces and those in our customer, client, and networks around the world. And that is a skill I call digital body language. Digital body language are the cues and signals we send in our digital communication that make up the subtext of our messages. And every single day, whether we know it or not, we are sending digital body language signals that make or break whether we are connecting intelligently with our customers, with our partners, and with our colleagues. I want to share, go back to the Sarah John story, because I think it's a perfect example of digital body language in practice. Sometimes what we say isn't what we mean, but we can't always use the clutch of the head nod or the handshake to make up for that loss of traditional body language. We now have to understand that body language hasn't disappeared, it is transformed. And in today's quick session, I'm going to share with you what I call 4 laws of digital body language that will allow you to make sure you're building that emotional connection and trust with teams, with colleagues, with networks, regardless of distance. As I go through each of these 4 laws, share with me in the chat which law is resonating with you most, and how can you really use these as you think about your own organization to supercharge connecting intelligently. The first law of digital body language is what I call value visibly. Now, in a world where so many of our cues of appreciation are now invisible, the head nod, the team dinner, the offsite in person, I like to say valuing others visibly. It's valuing their time, their inboxes, and their schedules. Valuing others visibly in today's world is making sure we're not chronically canceling meetings. We're being thoughtful of even simple things like agendas. It's about watching the clock, starting on time, ending 5 minutes early so people have that mental health break, acknowledging those individual differences. Introverts have told me they are thriving using tools like the chat, where they are avoiding turn taking. They were already struggling with airtime in the office, and they can engage in more creative ways that allows everyone to share versus just a few people in the office. And it's also about practicing radical recognition. I like to say the quick THX period thank you email doesn't cut it anymore when it comes to thank you. Take the time to give credit where it's due, to show radical recognition. Even simple things like wins of the week, appreciation awards, a quick video shout out can go a long way in making sure your colleagues feel like you hear them and you appreciate them. Let me give you some even some examples of how we value others visibly across our differences. Introverts really prefer time to think before meetings, so send those agendas in advance with questions you want to share. In the meeting, especially in a hybrid format, use the power of the chat. Maybe have everyone share their answers to key questions in the chat first, and then call on people that have the most diverse or different perspectives. Extroverts really love their airtime, but make sure you manage it, whether it's specific time blocks, breakout rooms, meeting moderators. Especially if you're running a hybrid meeting, I recommend calling on remote attendees first to share, but using the chat as a way to make sure that people aren't repetitive, you're hearing from different perspectives, and also having breakout rooms where some attendees are in the room and some attendees are remote with different screens, so that you can garner that cross knowledge from those that would be in the office and those that would be remote. Another example of valuing others visibly is what I call, we all have different nuances when it comes to digital body language. And I like to call it digital natives to digital adapters. Now, digital natives are those that are often thriving in the world of digital body language. They love text, IM, shorthand. They love remote work. They hate voicemail. They'll never check it. They don't like phone calls out of the blue. They tend to skew younger, but they're not all young people. Digital adapters are those that feel like immigrants to the world of virtual work. They can't wait to get back to the office and meet in person. Much more preference for phone calls, much more reluctance with new technology. And digital adapters will tell me, they'll get an email from a digital native with questions, and they'll say, I want to get on the phone to discuss. And the native will say, I just want to get an email back from you of answers. And the native will be like, why don't you just pick up the phone? And the adapter will be like, why don't you just answer my email? And one of the things we have to remember here is that we are not all the same. Much like learning a new language, digital body language has different languages across generations, genders, and even cultures. And so really understanding our own styles and valuing our teams and colleagues visibly will go a long way in connecting no matter the distance. The second law is what I call communicate carefully. Now, what I mean here is, I'll sum it up with one story. One of my clients sent a message to his boss saying, do you want to speak Wednesday or Thursday? And his boss responded, yes. Now, I like to share this story because reading messages carefully is the new listening, and writing clearly is the new empathy. So we have to think before we type. Choose maniacal clarity and choose the right channel. Pick up the phone after multiple reply all emails. Don't allow 30-person video calls when really only 6 people need to be there. These simple steps will not only transform how we avoid connecting in overload and connect intelligently. The third law is collaborate confidently. Now, confidence used to look like being gregarious, getting the whole team together in a room. In today's world, I like to say confidence is saying what you'll do and doing what you'll say. It's following through on your commitments. Let me give you some examples where confidence isn't built. If we say I need a report by the end of the week, but then team members are forced to rework it because you didn't really know what you wanted, you were hasty instead of thoughtful, which often happens with the speed of digital communication. This doesn't create confidence. Or perhaps someone says, I'll get back to you soon, but then you're chasing them down for half an answer. It's okay to not have an answer, but in today's world, connecting intelligently is being consistent in our messages. Another one, I need to spike tomorrow morning, but it's not really a fire drill. There are fire drills, but actually really being thoughtful about work-life boundaries. What response time expectations now are not just critical skills for productivity, but they can avoid burnout, they can avoid isolation, and truly create a culture of satisfaction and transformative results. So collaborating confidently is about prioritizing thoughtfulness over hastiness. It will allow you to create cultures that aren't rushing, but it will actually get the best ideas at the table, just like the examples of Granny Cloud, of Colgate, and even the law firm example. It's about informing the right people at the right times, breaking those silos, not just thinking within teams, but asking ourselves, who else can help? How can we engage them to be part of solutions? And how can we look beyond just the usual experts based on job titles, but anyone, anywhere in our transformed world? Lastly, collaborating confidently is simply paying attention to the details and making sure we are giving everyone exactly what they need to do their best work. This is a simple example of an output of one of my virtual workshops with a client. We realized that not only was it critical to talk about collaborating confidently, but setting norms matters today in a hybrid world. What was implicit in traditional body language must be explicit in our digital body language. So one simple practice I hope you'll take away from this GDA Live is to think about what has really worked well on your team in the last year in our digital format. What has worked even better? And what worked really better pre-pandemic? Use that to set some norms. What do we want to improve in emails, in IMs, in calls, in meetings, in hybrid meetings? By setting some explicit norms, especially in this moment in time, we will make sure we're not reverting to poor behaviors that were in the office in the past, but we are transforming how we work to really lead with competitiveness in our new future. The fourth and final law of digital body language is what I call trust totally. Now, let's be honest, trust in our new world is hard. Whether it's awkward screen freezes, echo delays, the lack of tone and body language in our emails. Trusting each other totally is really the integration of value visibly, communicate carefully, and collaborating competently. It's about giving others the benefit of the doubt. If they write a, what does that mean with question marks, or we need to talk ... we don't get emotionally hijacked. We don't assume negative intent. We check if our interpretations are correct and sometimes make sure we're opting for that phone call. I like to say a phone call is worth 1,000 emails. We create those virtual or hybrid water cooler moments. I recommend hybrid office hours where team members are co-working so that you're not just exclusive of those coffee chats in the office, you're creative, to allow everyone to connect intelligently and be part of those informal discussions and show vulnerabilities. Whether it's simple practices of everyone sharing one win of the week, one challenge of the week in a team meeting, or a leader asking for one piece of bad news they normally wouldn't want to hear in a meeting. Creating psychological safety is not assuming that people will share hard things, but really asking, not assuming everyone's okay, and creating that space by showing your own vulnerabilities first. So in today's session, I'm so honored. I wanted to give you a quick glimpse of two of my most common keynotes. Get Big Things Done, the power of connectional intelligence, which is all about really transforming how we work, how we move from emotional intelligence to connectional intelligence, and my second keynote, which is on the power of digital body language, how we collaborate faster and further. And you can see these keynotes and interactive workshops really apply no matter the audience, whether it's executives, team people managers, salespeople, large organizations doing town halls, and even small teams doing workshops. In my sessions, I share sample questions, and this is just a quick glimpse that will allow your teams to immediately put into practice the 4 laws. They'll not only audit themselves in the interactive session, but they'll also have a toolkit to ask thoughtful questions in their next team meeting. And I hope that you'll join me right now in sharing of the 4 laws, which one resonated with you most? Was it value visibly? Was it communicate carefully? Was it collaborate confidently? Or was it trust totally? Or was it all 4? And where do you see the biggest opportunity to master connectional intelligence in our modern day world? I also want to share that I have a new book, and I want to thank Gail. I want to thank GDA. I love working with this amazing team to really bring best-in-class experiences to audiences. So whether that's fun fish bowls, where we're assessing digital body language of attendees, where we're using scenarios from the organization to really reflect that in today's world, what we say is not what we mean. So we truly have to remember that digital body language is not just about how we show up on a screen. It's about how we make others feel in a modern marketplace. And I hope you'll really join me to think about how we can use this moment, not to go back to work, but to truly transform work, not to rely on connection overload. We don't need more video meetings, more emails, but to actually think about how we can connect intelligently, how we can use this moment to be more inclusive, more innovative, and more transformative than we've ever been in the past. So I hope that you'll join me. I want to thank GDA. I want to thank you, Gail. And I hope you'll all ask yourself this simple question: how will you connect intelligently for all of those counting on your wisdom, your creativity, and your heart? Thank you so much again. And I'll pass it back on to Gail.
Thank you so much, Erica. I loved it. I really like that last tip of it's not just how you show up on the camera, but it's how you make others feel. And I think if we listen to our intuition, we know what you kind of sense when you're not being understood. And if that can be our cue just to pick up the phone instead of making up the story, I think that's great advice.
Research shows that 60 to 80% of our communication is body language. So we have to remember that in this moment in time, knowing how to use each channel, but also when to switch the channel is so critical.
What about what responsibility do attendees have for somehow emoting during a meeting? Because sometimes I'm often the one doing the talking, and I feel like, a brief assertion of interest or a head nod, would be helpful, because it's also, I'm sure for you, you're used to a real audience where people are clapping and giving feedback. And I'm just curious, do you feel like attendees sort of have a responsibility to show their engagement?
Gail, what I like to say is actually the responsibility lies in the host first, and then the attendees. I like to say in virtual meetings, we have to think less like office meeting hosts and more like TV show hosts. They've always had to connect from afar, and they do a few critical things. One, they always prepare, very thoughtful about the agenda and their script. Two, they call on people, on CNN or Fox. They call on people to speak. They know when to thematically summarize what's just been discussed. They bring individuals in for different segments, whether that's as hosts, making sure we ask everyone to share their thoughts in the chat or on a virtual whiteboard before we engage. Asking people, what's one thing you are reflecting on from what I just shared? What's one question you have from what I just shared? And then going around versus assuming that people will speak up. These are critical factors that will help us connect intelligently. When it comes to attendees, I think it is a responsibility for all of us to stay engaged. And I think simple things like being thoughtful of your video body language. If you have to look down at your phone for a minute, maybe then going into the chat and sharing something that you agree with or something thoughtful to show that you're listening can really help. But first and foremost, great meetings create great results. And it's the opportunity of all of us, starting with the host, to design those meetings for audience engagement.
I like that. And I like when you said call on the remote attendees first to bring them in. So I think that's really good.
I always do that in my hybrid sessions. What I do is I ask the remote attendees to share their questions first, and it removes the bias that we often have to who's in the room and then go to the room attendees.
That's awesome. One thing we've learned in our office is we were all gathering in the conference room with one camera. And the remote attendees felt sort of disconnected from us because no matter how hard you try, we were doing a little bit of cross-talking. And so the suggestion was made, why don't all of us be on our own camera? And I think the engagement's better.
Absolutely. I know many companies now that are setting up a couple cameras in the room so it can move based on who's speaking. I also think that it is incredibly important to be thoughtful of remote attendees and what they're visually seeing in the room. And don't hesitate to actually keep the power of the chat. Remote attendees can share in the chat and have it up on a screen share in a hybrid meeting so that individuals can all share at the same time around big topics versus turn taking.
That's a great idea. Well, if anyone has any questions, you can certainly put them in the chat, or if you think of it later, don't hesitate to reach out to anyone at GDA. Erica is so accessible, and so we can get the questions to her. I think she also gave us some books, so I think we're planning on doing a drawing and getting some books out to those of you who attended today. If you have an interest of bringing Erica in to speak to your group live or to do a virtual presentation, just let us know. We're happy to help you with that. And any final thoughts, Erica? I mean, it was great content. I really appreciate it.
My one final thing I'll share is I grew up as a shy and introverted girl. My parents were Indian immigrants in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And for so much of my life, I struggled to find my voice. I remember being a kid and going to school and watching the popular girls with their heads high, the cool kids slouching during school assemblies. And so much of what I learned was that it is not what we say, it's how we say it. And that's what developed my passion for body language as an immigrant kid. But today I realized we're all immigrants to digital body language, and we're all learning this together. And so I hope that you'll really join me. And I love to share lessons from my own personal story, as well as the stories from all of us so that we can all learn and thrive in this new world together. Thank you so much, Gail.
Awesome. So inspiring. Thank you so much for your time. I know everyone enjoyed the content. I want to thank everyone. I know many of you only allowed 30 minutes, so I know you'll be jumping off. Our next GDA Live is going to be July 19th with John Register, who is a really inspiring two-time Paralympian with an incredible story. Again, if you need more information on Erica, let us know. Don't forget to go buy her book. It's got all this content plus so much more. Thank you, Erica. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.